Next, Remington, I caught on Netflix the new, highly anticipated Catherine Bigelow film, A House of Dynamite, starring Idris Elba, Rebecca Ferguson, many other British actors playing Americans. Uh, I was very excited for this. This was one of those movies that I want to say premiered at Venice, and I did hear some mixed reactions initially of the film when it premiered there. Some critics that I follow that saw it. However, the premise just sounded so damn good about a nuclear missile being launched at the U.S., set in modern day, and they have something like, I don't know, 18 minutes or something to react to it. And it's a political thriller about, just the people in power in DC and government, how they respond to an emergency like this and what it would look like, as realistic as possible. A ton of research done for it. I love most of what I've seen from Catherine Bigelow. Actually, I haven't really seen that many of her movies, to be honest. I love The Hurt Locker. I think The Hurt Locker is amazing. And I know this has kind of been her bag for a little bit. It's been a long time since she made a movie. And let's be honest, there's not a lot of female filmmakers, unfortunately, working today that I'm very familiar with her kind of a track record. So, and she has a very specific niche that she's in with these political thrillers these days. So I was ready for this movie. And yeah, so we have the final product on Netflix. What'd you think of A House of Dynamite?
So I went to see this at Paris Theater. That is Netflix's movie theater that they own in Midtown. It was, I think it was always called the Paris Theater, but they bought it in like 2019, basically. And that's what they use to, because in order to qualify for Oscars, you have to have at some type of release in the United States in that year. So they use this theater as a way to qualify for awards. They say, look, we did a limited release. And they just show it at this one movie theater in New York City. It is the last single screen theater in Manhattan.
Oh, wow.
Right? Before multiplexes were a thing, single screen theaters were like the norm in this country. So it's the last one. Nice venue. So I went to go see it. I'm one of the very few people who got to go see it outside of a film festival, like on a big screen. When I was watching this, so when it starts, and as it's going through, for what I want to say about like the first 2/3 of this thing,
Mhm.
you know, tension is riveting, right? It's ratcheting. Like I'm stressed. I am very stressed most of this movie. I am like, oh my god, what is happening? This is crazy. Who did what? What is going to do on? This is crazy. And I am immediately captured by some of these ensemble performances, right? Rebecca Ferguson, Jason Clark, Jared
Jason
Harris,
Clark.
right? Yes, our boy Jason Clark. May God take his soul. I'm immediately engaged, right? And even though you can kind of see the structure of like, okay, we did this first chapter and now we're going to go look at the same thing from a different perspective. And it's like, those initial chapters, right? First, we start from the perspective of the troops at that one missile site in Alaska, I would say, right? So that's interesting enough on its own. And then you get the perspective from like the Situation Room, right underneath the White House. That's an interesting perspective. And even the perspective of the Deputy National Security Advisor in his days, he's learning about it and trying to get people to listen to him. That's kind of interesting. Once we leave that, this is where the movie starts to lose me, actually. This is where things start to feel repetitive to me. It's like,
wait,
all right, come on, we've seen these.
Is this in this when they start the second act?
Yeah, so like
Or
when we get to like the generals, and even once we get to Jared Harris's chapter as the Secretary of Defense, and even a little bit Idris Elba. There's a little bit more going on with Idris Elba, like just on like a dramatic level that I can like forgive his piece of it. But like everything else, it's just like the like we've done these plot beats now multiple times. We're just saying things over and over again. We know what's happening. We have the same amount of information. We're just adding new, like we have the same amount of characters. We're just adding more pages to their character sheet and more pages to like the plot without actually like moving anywhere, you know? And that's where it's like, okay, great. What are we doing? What's happening? Cool. And I'm like, where is this going? And then the movie ends. And it ends with like no resolution. It ends without ever circling back on like a bunch of characters from like the first half of the film. And it ends without like a clear answer beyond, of course, like what the message of the movie is. The movie is essentially a giant PSA of like, hi, nuclear proliferation is bad. We should do something about that. So beyond the message, you know, it ends without any other clear answers of like what is going on and what happened. And so I was kind of left there sitting I think like someone in our audience audibly exclaimed, "That was it?" Like as soon as those credits started rolling, what the hell? You know, I'm like super stressed, but I have nowhere to like get the release of that energy. And now the movie's over. And so I was left to dwell on it. It's kind of like, yeah, I get that, you know, we're making a statement here with an ending like that, right? That like it's like, well, we don't have in this type of situation, we don't have perfect information. We kind of just are doing the best we can in this like high amount of uncertainty, right? And you have to make these like rational, practical choices, weigh like cost and benefit, you know, and calculate risk, you know, and this is all these things that could happen. And so it's like all of this being done, and it's like it's okay that we haven't revisited these characters and not given them any clean resolution, because you know they're ultimately there to serve this wider point, which is that conveying the message: nuclear proliferation is bad. We should be more mindful about that. And so I thought, well, does that work on its own terms? And fortunately, I was kind of left feeling mixed to negative. I don't like this movie. I don't think that it ultimately works in the end. I think that this choice, in terms of just sort of slicing it off when there's probably like another third of movie that probably could have existed to like wrap things up, just so you get that like punch in the end of it just like cutting to black. I think that that is ultimately done in service of disguising what is a pretty underbaked screenplay, in my opinion. And if we just want to be, where, you know, like we have all these characters, they're just kind of there to do a job, right? They're kind of there to serve a purpose. Similar kind of like what, even though I disagreed with you, the charges you were leveling against the characters of the going are there to serve a message or an idea. They're not developed. Well, it's kind of the same thing, right? We have, I forget her name. She was the actress who was in Obi-Wan Kenobi that got like
Moses Ingram.
Yeah, so she plays a character who works for FEMA. We see her for one scene, and yet she is star billing. We never go back to her again. And she's just there, so that way we have an idea of, oh, this is what FEMA is supposed to do when there's a crisis like this. And I guess maybe other people might hate you if you get to be the person who goes into the White House bunker because you got picked that day. That's it. Never get to see her again. We don't have a lot of resolution or payoff on all these things that are set up in the beginning. It just sort of ends because it really wants to capitalize on that like shock ending that we just don't have clear resolution. And yeah, and if you take all that aside, you just really try to put the movie on its own terms, which is just like it wants you to feel that, it wants you to sit in that, and it wants you to just absorb the PSA that is the movie. Well, I don't think the PSA works either. And I
No.
think that's because what this movie wants us to believe, and I do think this is a central thesis to Catherine Bigelow's works. I've only seen Zero Dark 30. I haven't seen like The Hurt Locker or Detroit.
Ooh. Okay.
And we can get into Zero Dark 30. I don't know if you have thoughts on Zero Dark 30, but uh, she wants us to believe that our government is staffed with like capable, competent people who care about what they're doing. And just because, their methods might be a little bit extreme or they're a little bit harsh in person, it's because they're serious about their job and they care about what they do and they just want to do the best for everyone, and no matter how tense a situation. And so because of that, we have to take them at maximum good faith. And we have to, accept a lot of these actions, right? And she's doing that as just like a given assumption. So that way she can show, all right, well, this is how it would happen. This is the scenario. This is how this would play out. These are how these would likely go. This would likely go down. And unfortunately, we don't live in that world.
Well,
We don't have
sure.
that government.
Right. Yeah, that's the elephant in the
I'm
room.
not disparaging, the many like career civil servants who work for our federal. There are serious people who do care
Sure.
about their job and want to serve the public and do well.
Of course.
But we live in 2025. Donald Trump is our president. He is someone who's currently working very hard to gut the civil service, right, and replace it with ideological sycophants. You are more likely to see people in those very same positions of government that were showcased throughout this film who are there not because of their qualifications or their experience, but because of the fact that they are cronies to the party. They are necessarily sycophantic and just like, they're ass kissers, right? Or they're ideologues. They're actually insane. And they're actually not going to know what to do in a situation, or only going to be able to view it not through the sober lens of like careful consideration, but through the lens of ideology and emotion, right? They're not going to be calm. They're going to lash out. They're going to freak out, or they're disappear, And so you can say that maybe the movie allows this, right? Jared Harris character literally goes and kills himself at the end of the movie. But even that is kind of like he had to build up to that point, right? It's not like a given thing. And I think I saw someone on Twitter say it's almost like it's Dr. Strangelove who had nothing interesting to say. And I'm like, yeah, and that's kind of what the movie's been rendered to, because we have this underlying assumption of, everyone is just trying to do the best they can. Well, when Pete Hegseth is my Secretary of Defense, JD Vance is my Vice President, I don't think that everyone's trying to do the best they can. I think they're trying to do what's best for them in the moment. And
Sure.
That is just a reality that I don't think this film reckons with, and therefore the PSA does not succeed. We actually have a president who spent a good part of his first term and is now in his second presidency trying to continue on this trend, do much to undo the norms of nuclear control, right, and undo a lot of those treaties that we had set up during the Cold War and even into the 90s when we were figuring things out with the Russians. Like, he wants us to have more nukes. He wants to expand our arsenal. He's the one who is ratcheting up this risk, and I don't think that's a thing that the movie can conceive. Right, the movie essentially wants us to believe the president, he's a good guy. He got into this maybe for the right reasons, for different reasons. He wasn't a foreign policy guy. He never expected to be put into this situation. And he's like stressed. He's as stressed as we are. And he's like really weighing the decision of like, do I use the football? And in some ways that's real, right? Like Trump in his first term, he came damn close to invading Iran, to bombing Iran, right? Like the planes were literally on the way and he blinked last minute and turned them around. Right. So he feels it too. I'm not saying there's he doesn't have a pulse or anything. You know what I'm saying? But like, do we really think that Donald Trump would do nothing if Chicago got flattened, which is what the movie was like entertaining us. You know, we really think that he would behave rationally, that he would really second guess himself, triple guess himself. I don't think most presidents would actually behave that way. I don't think most presidents, most elected officials in our government, regardless of party, would be able to accept that actually the best course is if we see what happens after everyone in Chicago died and the surrounding area was like irradiated, which is what the movie was telling us is going to happen. We don't actually know because the movie ends, right? But like, that's what the movie wants us to consider here. And so, yeah, to me, it doesn't work because it says that it's trying to show us what reality is and what reality would be like, when it actually is just a fantasy and not a particularly interesting fantasy, and one that ultimately misses the mark as it relates to our times. So that's where I'm at with House of Dynamite. I don't know about you.
Well, I mean, I largely agree with most of what you said. I mean, yeah, I mean, obviously the big thing about a movie like this is, this is a theme in movies of this year. We literally just talked about Begonia. Of trying to be in the moment. Something like a House of Dynamite, right, is you're seeing a lot of competent people in government do their jobs, and I am trying to take the movie when I watch it in a vacuum, right, and think, okay, clearly based on Idris Elba, not just because he's black, but because of his wife that they keep cutting back to, who's very clearly meant to be a Michelle Obama type. I think they're like, you could just see it in,
Yes.
it's meant to be like an Obama. Okay, let's just put this in a vacuum with and negate every fucking thing else that's going on in this administration, that we're being run by fucking podcasters and influencers, right? And Fox News hosts, I'm giving it the benefit of that doubt. Of this is not necessarily a comment on, like, we're just not acknowledging the administration. We're just thinking in quote unquote normal times. Yeah, it's still just so unsatisfying on a structural level. I appreciate, I'm trying to think, like, we were just talking about Begonia, how I feel like I needed more from the characters. It felt more like a character piece. I understand that I don't need the most depth from characters in a movie like this, right? Where the idea is we're seeing people, very competent people, be very good at their jobs. And I believe the writer of this movie, I don't remember the name, but this guy, Noah Oprem, terrible at reading names. He was like a reporter for the White House, or this guy has a lot of experience reporting on government, I believe. I think he's like a journalist or something. But there was a lot of research, I know, going into this movie. They wanted to make it seem as realistic as possible of what would it look like from government, if a nuclear missile was headed toward us. And that's kind of almost like what the exercise is meant to be here, right? Which I appreciate, and I think could be interesting to see what would it, in a normal world, not in Trump 2.0, like Obama era, what would it look like if a missile was coming towards America? And I think just that exercise is interesting. Like, I don't need, like, it's not necessarily a character study. Like, all the characters are just, we're seeing people in government in these rooms, in these, control rooms, being very competent, good at their jobs. And the idea is, if a nuke is coming at you, there's almost very little you can do, no matter how competent you are, and how dedicated you are, and how many things you have set up in place, and and how many systems. And I think I thought all that was interesting. I was in on that. I thought, okay, like you were saying, like, I thought, okay, this is, I understand the wavelength that I'm on it, and this is interesting. But when you cut back to the second act, to the next, like, from a different perspective, I guess at the end of the day, yeah, the movie better better stick the landing. It's really hinging on, we're going to stick the landing, and this third act is going to have something to say, or something profound, or something is going to, like, I didn't need to see a mushroom cloud in the end, and I don't think that's what you were saying either.
No.
Like, you just needed there to be a point to the end of it, to make all of this, and I do think, yeah, I think what you were kind of saying, like when you reset to, okay, now we're going to a different perspective, the air deflates a little bit, you know, in the balloon, yes. And you're like, okay, all right, like, I'm still with you. I get it, we're from somewhere else. I get we're just kind of seeing the different chain, the links in this chain and where it would go. Like, I think Tracy Letts is fantastic. I get, like, you know, Rebecca Ferguson was so good, like the little character moments, when the person with her in the control room, like, says he always going to propose to his wife. That's a little cliche, like, everyone's like, oh, I got a baby on the way, I'm going to propose to my fiance or whatever, my, you know, but all I thought was, okay, I'm really in on this, and it's got that documentary style of filmmaking where, like, the camera's all kind of handheldy and it looks really good, and I think, okay, but you better have a fucking point to this, or you better have something to say. And ultimately, when you get to the Idris Elba character as the president, whew, man, I think maybe that's what we'll disagree a little bit. I thought the balloon was completely flat. I thought they didn't have anything to say or do with him and what happened when they brought him up into that plane. I thought, why is he just by himself with this one guy? I don't know. And then he just referencing what he heard on a podcast or something, like, oh, we're just in a house of dynamite. And I'm like, yeah, okay. And then, you know, yeah, I just felt like this movie was taking a huge fucking bite out of what it was gonna like. I get the mechanics, the enjoyment of seeing, like, the minutia of the bureaucracy of, okay, like, here's what all goes into what this process would look like, and there's enjoyment to be had in that, and the tenseness, but you really got to stick that landing of, like, why did you want to tell this story? And unfortunately, there's just so much deflated in, with Idris Elba, just it not going anywhere. The cut to black, I think the cut to black is a cop out. You gotta, and this is with all the charitability, Remington, of me saying, I'm not thinking about this in terms of modern day, which is, by the way, something that most people will not be able to see past. Right? Of, like, I'm thinking this is a movie that was made and came out in, like, Obama era. Like, I'm trying to, like, not even consider the fact that we don't even live in this world. But even on that wavelength, all that charitability, there's nothing there except for, yeah, if this happened, yeah, wouldn't we be all fucked? Like, no matter how competent they were, and we are, and I feel like I need some sort of stance to be made about that. You know what I mean? Does that make sense? Like I said, I would have been like, if I would have even liked it a little bit more if at the end of the movie there was, like, text on the screen of saying, you know, this many countries are armed with nuclear arsenals, they could wipe out this much, blah, 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 blah. Like, we need to consider, like, if there was some sort of, like, call to action, even through text after it cut to black, I would have given this, like, another star. You know what I mean? It feels, yeah, like, I'm sick of movies like I felt like Begonia kind of is, not to get back, but, like, I need, like start taking a stand of something. Like, if this is what you're going to be, I get that it's mainly an exercise.
Well, Begonia does have an opinion. Like, even you agreed about Begonia has an opinion.
I did, but I don't know. I just, yeah, I guess all the tenseness, I largely echo and agree with what you said. It kind of just takes all the air out of the bag, and doesn't go anywhere.
No,
Yeah.
I agreed with everything you said. Um, just to clarify, what I liked about the uh, Idris Elba part was his performance. Everything, the scene itself, like everything around it, was not anything special to me. And in fact, to even really like hone in on your point, like he's in the helicopter. What works about it to me is like how sweaty he is and like the work he as actor is putting in. But the actual scene, if you think about it, it's just him and like the one guy who's in charge of carrying the football, right? And the guy who's carrying the football is kind of like, okay, here are your options. This is the things that you can do. By the way, the one that I think is best is the one that kills all of these people and starts like nuclear Armageddon. He doesn't say that, but that's essentially what he's recommending. But because the movie doesn't have like a broader lens on this or like a real thesis beyond of nuclear weapons are bad. We should do something about them. It can't. It doesn't add there's no layer to that character pushing the most extreme option to him in a very like sober, very calm, collect voice, right? To a very stressed out president who's probably very suggestible right now on what should be done. There's no interiority, there's no complexity. It's a lost moment. It's a lost opportunity, and that's why a lot of ways the scene doesn't work. Even though I think Idris Elba is putting in the work in it. And so, I agree with a lot of what you are saying, and that's kind of goes back to like what I had referenced earlier, which is it's Doctor Strangelove if there was nothing interesting to be said. Doctor Strangelove is in some ways a similar story, right? It is a story of how like all of our supposed safeguards to prevent like unintentional, accidental, mistaken nuclear war fall apart because one crazy person takes the reins and there's no meaningful checks to stop them, and everyone just is lying and acting in bad faith. You know what I'm saying?
Yes, but I think sorry not to cut you off, but I think Doctor Strangelove there's more meat on the bones to chew on because it's Doctor Strangelove is like a comedy. It is making
yes
light of like.
No, we're agreeing. That's what I'm saying.
Yes.
I'm
is so stupid, and we are so fucking selfish. Like yes, but yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
Yes, because Doctor Strangelove has a very clear frame, which is that Stanley Kubrick.
That's a good way to put it.
Weapons of like Stanley Kubrick thought that the logic of mutually assured destruction was stupid. He thought it was absurd. He thought
comical.
The underlying, and so that's where the movie starts from. And he was like, "Oh, you really want to trust these insane fascists in the military-industrial complex to act well and mean well and always do the correct thing? And you really think this little system that you put in place is going to be enough?" Well, let me tell you, buddy, I got something to say about that. That's kind of like where he was coming from. And Catherine Bigelow can't do that because Catherine Bigelow made a movie where all of the key players are just trying to do their best. They may not always agree, but they're trying to do their best. They mean well. They want to serve the public. They want to do what's right for the country. And because everyone's on the same page with that, and we don't stay with any characters long enough to really explore what that might mean in different circumstances, it's flat. In a lot of ways, it's very flat. And just circle back even earlier to what you said. I think that one of the problems with this movie, so we laugh about him now because we're a little more removed from when he was at his peak. But think about Dan Harmon, right? Dan Harmon, co-creator of Rick and Morty and creator of Community. He often says that stories should be like circles, right? That like you're introducing things, you're setting things up, and then you wrap up around when you start paying off things and revisiting things, and characters sort of end where they begin, but maybe not in the way that you expected. if stories are a circle, this story is just a line, right?
That's yeah.
There is no
Yeah.
wrap. There is no wrapping around. We don't go back to anything. It's just
Yeah.
kind of like it happened. Oh well, it happened. Oh, it happened. Oh, it happened. Yeah, it happened. Yeah, it happened.
Yeah.
And oh, you saw it happen. Yeah, I saw it happen. Oh yeah, it happened. Oh, I'm seeing it happened. And because of that, there's nothing to be gained. There's nothing to be learned. There's nothing. It sacrifices for a film. Surprising to say, for a film that makes you feel so stressed in the beginning, right? So panicked and concerned. And there's some real lack for drama as a result of this. I would say.
Yeah.
A lot is lost in character and story. And so that's where I come down. I think it's just structurally a very weak film that comes from a very underbaked screenplay, and it's ultimately all in service of a message that I just don't think works as well as it may have wanted to, as it may have hoped, because of the times in which we live.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. That's a good. I like how you said it's like the frame. Was Kubrick had a better frame. That's a good way to put it. In talking, just listening to what you were saying, it's what I feel like. What I feel like a movie like this is, or what I expect from Catherine Bigelow, where she makes these very timely political thrillers. I don't have. I honestly don't remember Zero Dark 30 all that well, which I did see. I just remember it was addressing a lot of like torture among like post 9/11. I think I don't remember it too well, honestly. I don't.
It's a story about the assassination of Osama bin Laden.
Yeah, I thought Zero Dark 30 was fine. From what I remember, it's been a long time. What I loved so much about The Hurt Locker was The Hurt Locker, and I'm not going to spoil anything because you said you haven't seen it. The Hurt Locker was so much more of a character piece of Jeremy Renner's character, who was a soldier in the Iraq, I believe, or Afghanistan, one of them. And the ending of The Hurt Locker is so impactful of what it says about what happens to. It's not commenting necessarily on our wars in the Middle East, post 9/11. It's more about like what happens to the people that went there, and more about like what that happened to that whole generation that went overseas. And the ending was so powerful and simple and effective. Like I said, it was so much more of a character study of what happens to that type of person. But there was a nice punctuation to that movie. Where a movie like this, I was on the wavelength of, okay, this is an exercise. Like I was saying of okay, this is what it would actually look like. The third act, and not that I agree, Idris Elba gave a good performance, even though I kind of like, by this point, I've seen so many British actors like Rebecca Ferguson, like who I actually thought Rebecca Ferguson was the best part of the movie, her character.
Yeah, it's actually funny how for a movie about like America, it's actually just a bunch of British people pretending to be Americans, like most of the cast. Jason Clarke is actually Australian. Points stands, like yeah.
I love Jason Clarke is underrated, I think, but yeah, but he always seems to be like one of those guys in the control room.
Yeah,
but
some lawyer somewhere, like
yeah, Oppenheimer, like the interrogation room. But by the end, yeah, I just saw Idris Elba at the end being like, "Oi, we gotta solve this. I gotta make a choice." And that's how I kind of was like, oh my God, so much. Yeah. But he was good. But you know what it felt like? It felt like, yeah, the movie didn't, the what it was building up to, not just structurally, like just of what, okay, this is an exercise. This is what we're, in my mind, that's how I was reading it, of like how this would all play out. And then the third act kind of just read to me like, oh, I feel like I felt like by the third act, this is kind of my comparison. Walk with me on this. I felt like by the third act, I'm like, am I in a Roland Emmerich movie now? We're just like, oh, it's just like a disaster porn movie. Like, and it just, I don't know. Like, there was no
It's not even a
punctuation.
disaster movie, though.
It,
We
it,
don't. It's not even a disaster movie, right? Because we don't see the disaster. The appeal of the disaster movie is that your characters are going through the disaster, and so you get all of these like compelling little moments where there's action and everyone's scared and stressed and people are trying to do their best, and like real blockbuster acting, right? So it's not a disaster movie. Perhaps if it had been a disaster, we would have liked it.
yeah. No, yeah, you're right.
The movie makes a point of us not seeing the nuke hit, right? Not seeing any fallout.
Yeah. It just doesn't work.
And the closest it gets to like human drama is when it's dawning on when you get to Jared Harris's chapter, which even though I was starting to feel repetitive, it was like the one point of like poignant drama that I felt, which is where he's realizing like, oh, that's where my daughter lives. And it doesn't matter. I can try to get her on the phone right now, but I can tell her to run, but it doesn't matter. She's not going to get out in time.
Right.
So all I can really do is just call her and say I love her. And I just have to sit with that. And ultimately he couldn't sit with that, and that's why he killed himself.
Right.
But because that's such a slight moment and just tacked on at the end, it just like it almost doesn't matter. You know what I mean? Like it loses it. If we found some sort of like human core, like say we had just stuck with like Rebecca Ferguson as our like vehicle to follow through as everything's happening, I think it would have been a lot stronger of a movie. In many ways.
It would have been
too
something
fragmented across such a huge ensemble with no clear focus that it loses a lot, in my opinion.
I agree. It needed to. If I think there's a world where a structure like this could have worked, but you need to land that ending with a structure like this, and you need to have some punctuation on it. And the way that you just cut to black, I don't need to see a mushroom cloud. That's not what I'm saying, but but you need to like have something to say or something, not just Idris Elba go like, I heard something on a podcast that we're just all just a house of dynamite and we could all just blow each other up at what? Like, I'm like, oh God, okay, yes, sure. Like it just wasn't the movie for that.
Just like kind of dumb because it's like you're the commander in chief, dude. You get like presidential briefings every morning. Like if you want to know more about nuclear weapons, you can just like call up the Secretary of Energy who's in charge of the nuclear arsenal. He will tell you about nuclear weapons. If you can talk to any scientist that you want, any member of the military you want at a moment's notice, and they will tell you about these things. And you're telling me, oh, I heard on a podcast that we live in a house of dynamite.
Yeah. I was listening to Rogan and
yeah, literally. At the time when I was watching it, I didn't like think of how like silly that line is, because I was just like, oh, it's just the thesis of the movie. They're just telling me the thesis of the movie, like what it means. Not that it wasn't obvious, but it's like, okay, cool. Like state your terms.
Sure,
that's cool.
Sure.
But like now that I think about it, it's like, why did you have the president say that?
In a different, but that's in a different movie, in a different kind of movie, like that could have worked. Like it's a cornball. Like right? That's not a wrong. But yeah, it didn't. It was so
like say we knew that he was more of like a populist figure, right? Like he didn't really have any experience in government. He just sort of was like elected, and he was like this do-gooder, naive, right? And then suddenly he's thrown into the crisis, right? So maybe that kind of thing would make more sense, that he gets information from podcasts. He doesn't trust institutions, right? But we don't have any of that. This movie is not interested in character. It only considers character insofar as each character can serve the larger message, and that's pretty much it.
Yeah. And where I just kind of want to put a period on it does feel like we are getting a lot of movies like we've mentioned this year about like the current moment. I've had this thought a lot recently, that I'm sure you've heard this with listening to people talk about movies, and you hear the criticism of like, well, this movie ultimately doesn't take a stand on anything, and it kind of cops out. Have you heard that kind of criticism?
Sure.
And
I probably levied it myself from time to time.
Sure, same here. And I get that. And you know, and it's not that I want the movie to like tell me who to vote for. Like I like that's not, I don't think. But I think the more I see like One Battle After Another I thought was brilliant, but that was much more broad, I think, in a good way of what it was addressing, you know, but like I want them to like feel like there is something being expressed, and that doesn't need to be a specific message that you can put in text, but like it can just be an emotion. And that's kind of what I got from like something like Eddington, where it was so easy for people to say like, well, it seems like Ari Aster is just throwing up his hands and saying, well, aren't both sides so crazy? Like I said this before, like where it just feels like this feels like a man fucking screaming into the void, feeling like I don't know what to do, and everything seems so like that. And I felt like that was something that was like an expression of some sort of anger. In no way, didn't even know where to put it, and I think that was profound. And there was so much to that movie, and I think that's why I think Eddington really is, how much as people don't like it for that reason. I like for thinking it's like both sidesing. I actually think Eddington is so goddamn good, especially the more the year goes on.
I agree. I'm there with you. I actually don't think Eddington is both siding. Not saying that that's what you think about it, but like I agree. Eddington is only grown with me over time.
And it's not even saying like, it's not even giving an answer. It's not giving a stance, but it's giving a feeling. It's giving a fucking emotion, you know? And that's like this is what it feels like to me. No,
you're correct. Because Eddington, what makes Eddington special, it's also why I think many people struggle with it, is Eddington is not actually concerned with whether you correctly understand it or not, because that's actually its point about like what has happened and what we are doing it to ourselves, which is that we are experiencing a fracturing of reality. We no longer exist in a place where we have shared information, and as a result, we all have our own individual unreality tunnels. There are 350 million individual unreality tunnels. Some of them overlap more than others, but very often they don't. And as a result, this is what will happen because of that. And to Ari Aster, what occurred during the pandemic represented a fundamental rupturing that just like caused this problem, which had kind of been there before, but just made it 1,000 times worse. And he's not sure we can go back. And this is kind of like what you're saying, him screaming into the wind about like, this is what's happening. We have to stop. And that is what and because of that, just circle back what I said, you know, the movie in form is doing in its form like what it is to exist in the world and experience media, right? It's kind of like, because we all live in our own realities, we're all interpreting something different. So it's all going to, we have no way to like check ourselves reliably. And so, you know, we're all going to come away with different responses, some of which will probably be wrong. Most of them will probably be wrong, but we're all going to be so convinced that we're right. And we're not going to want, because of where our minds work, we're not going to listen when someone tells us we're wrong. We have no way of checking I'm wrong ourselves. Right. So yeah, it's like, it's going to be wrong. And so the movie is kind of like, this is how this works, and that's how I'm going to work. And so, yeah, you know, it's not concerned with whether you understand it, because we live in a world where we don't really understand what's going on. Because that's the point. I don't know if I expressed that clearly, but like that's what is interesting about the film to me.
Right. No, I totally agree. And all that to say, yeah, that's where movies like A House of Dynamite, giving it all the chairability in the world of just like, I get it, you're not living in today's day. It just doesn't work. To be honest.
Yeah, well that's like Yeah, because like no, we should wait in our times because it is still a PSA, right? That I keep harping on this idea because that's what it is. It's
You're
if
right.
it has
Yeah.
one thing it wants to say, it's the message, right? It's screaming from the rooftops that we are setting ourselves up for nuclear Armageddon, right? We I think it does start with like a text of like, yeah, our stockpiles have grown by like such and such, yeah, and so with that frame, you're then watching like, well, how does this play out? And we don't have perfect information and think these things can happen. How does that play out? What should we do? What can we do to like, and so it's kind of like with that in mind, with that being the message, that bleak ending, that cut to black, okay, we have to do something. And so it's like, okay, so if this is a message that you have for us in the year 2025, do I think that works? Do I think that's compelling? And I don't think it's compelling because it's ultimately, as I said before, a fantasy.
Right.
It's not real.
Yes. Yes.
It can't
Yeah.
it can't actually resonate. It can't actually be a call to action because in order for it to work, it must assume that we are in a world that does not exist. We don't live in the West Wing.
You're so.
We don't
Yeah.
live. We don't
Yeah.
live in the Hurt Locker or the Zero Dark 30. We don't live in those artworks anymore. If we ever did at all, we live in a world where we are ruled by corrupt megalomaniacs, right? Who are deeply self-interested, and if they are committed to anything beyond self-enrichment, it's fascism, right? So they are just as likely to be the ones pushing the trigger in the first place, right? As they are to be the ones on the receiving end. So it's just not a useful movie, you know. And I think it's actually fair to knock it on those terms because if we are because that's the one thing it has going for it, right? It's that if you take if you put aside all of those deficiencies that we talked about in terms of structure, in terms of character, and say, well, it's all worth it just so you get to that ending when the cut to black and you could just feel those emotions, which is in service to, of course, the message. Well, I say it doesn't work
Right.
because
No.
the message doesn't work. And so that's just where I come down.
No. I completely. I couldn't agree more. Only thing I just wanted to say, in closing, just because when I see movies like this, I you know it's so funny, and I don't know what I'm. Did I look? I actually think the more I see movies like A House of Dynamite, the more I think a movie like Don't Look Up was great.
Yeah.
That's what I have to say. That's what I
Okay.
have so 180'd on Don't Look Up.
Okay.
I haven't seen it since it came out. But I'm like, you know what? You're so familiar with this whole saga, right? Of Don't Look Up when it came out?
Yes. Yes. I wasn't like super plugged in those days, but I did see it when it came out. You know, it was on Netflix. You know, it was very buzzy when it came out.
Dude, that movie was panned so hard by everyone of being too preachy, being too on the nose, being too like but I am to the point when I see movies like A House of Dynamite, I am like banging my fist and thinking back to that movie that everyone shit on. Big movie, right? Like DiCaprio, his only Netflix movie, Adam McKay, like huge cast, big movie, big swing, but he fucking said no. He's like, fuck you. It's obvious. It's these goddamn fascists. It's the right. And he named names, and not literally, but like in that movie, and was like, this is what it is, and we're all gonna die when it's right in our fucking face. It's literally right in our fucking face. Like the whole administration that we elect democratically, they look like look, Stephen Miller might as well be a Nazi general out of Schindler's Lists. And we're like collectively like applauding it or both sidesing it. And I'm sorry, like the more I think about Don't Look Up, I'm like, in hindsight, I'm like, no, he was completely correct. That movie was so much better than I think we ever gave it credit for. I'm starting the reappraisal for Don't Look Up. And I'm saying, nope, he was so right to be so on the nose and be like, no, you fucking idiots. Like, this is what it is. I'm sorry. Like, it's these right-wing fascists that are right in our face. Like, I sorry, I had to get that out there. I rated it very poorly at the time. And the more I think about it, I'm like, fuck me, I hate to say it, because apparently Adam McKay is very up his own ass, but I'm like, God damn it, I think he's right. I think he was so on point with that movie. To be like, he is the one guy that that actually takes a stand and is like, no, I'm gonna make it so in your face where movies like this are so like afraid to like actually say anything or take a stand or like, but like Don't Look Up was so a slap in the face of like a Michael Moore style like type of thing where like, no, you fucking idiots, this is it, and it's right in your face. Anyway, sorry, rant over.
No, you may have seen over on my letterbox this past year. I might have started it in 2024. I don't remember. I've been documenting what I call COVID cinema.
Oh yes, you told me.
I have an active list going of films I come across or have seen that I consider to be COVID films that either not necessarily had to have come out during that time, like many of them are now coming out after that period. But films that reckon with the like psychological phenomenon that we experienced during that time of the COVID era of like social isolation, intense polarization, and like economic shortfall, and all of those factors combined, and what happened. And I have to say, as I was going through them, we've had a few more additions to the canon, so to speak, this year that I think really do shine. I was on a podcast with you earlier where we talked about 28 Days Later, and I thought that was like a sterling example of a COVID movie. Mm-hmm. You and I both loved Eddington. That is obviously a COVID movie. That's just text, but I have to say, I've long felt that of the ones that came out, contemporaneous to that period, Don't Look Up is one of the better ones. And which is funny to say because it's story, and when it was written, its story is not about COVID, right? It's about climate change. It's metaphors about climate change. It was written and before COVID. I think it was actually even shot before COVID. I
believe so.
And it was about climate change. But one of the reasons that it found success with like wider audiences, not critics, but like, it was popular upon release, and that popularity eventually, of course, carried it to a Best Picture nomination, is that it resonated with our times, right? Because we were living in a moment, peak COVID, where this theme of science communication, where so many people felt like there is a very obvious problem in front of us. It is only getting worse. We have a virus. It is killing all of us. And if you don't, there are clear things. Yes, there's clear things you can do.
Your face.
Yes, clear things that you can do to mitigate this. People are dying around us. If we just take action and listen to the people who are telling us what to do and how to do it, we can save ourselves. But because of various entrenched interests and the just sheer stupidity of the people in power, we cannot do that. And also the clear shortcomings of science communication, and the way they choose to go about it just so it just landed with so many people is just so clearly true, clearly reflective of our time. And I think that I do think that that film will um, grow in its appraisal over time because of that. I think it is actually a good representation, even though it wasn't made with any of that in mind. Just had the good fortune of being released when it was released. I think that many people will look back at that as being like fairly emblematic of what it was like, what it felt like to live through that time, especially if you were like not on the right, you know, if you were in the center or on the left. And so yeah, I am open to a don't look up reappraisal. Is what I'm saying, and just to like circle it back, kind of like why we went down this road, this tangent to begin with, which is like I don't think it's bad when movies are clear. I don't think it's bad when movies take a firm stance. You know, I often find myself sort of like sneering at complaints when things are too like heavy-handed, because often what that means to me is it's like, okay, well, you just either didn't agree and don't want to say that with your chest, or because you know this movie just wasn't working for you. But like someone being clear in their intentions and what they're trying to, someone being like articulate in what they mean and what they're saying. I actually find that refreshing these days. We live in an era of
Yes.
like
Yeah.
such profound lies, deeply layered lies. We live in an era of double speak, right? We live in an era of fractured reality where we don't have any. We're
Yes.
increasingly losing access to reliable information, and so to have someone who means what they say and says what they mean and does it in such an effective manner, I don't think I can ever knock that. And I don't care like how on the nose it is. You know, like
I
oh, you
think
think it was heavy-handed that he had a clear metaphor? Okay, do you think it was like heavy-handed and any time that Spike Lee ever made a movie ever? Because that's you know his modus operandi, which is kind of like
unsubtle.
fuck you, like that's like all of his movies, right? Fuck you. That's like every movie he's ever made. Unsubtle. So like no, I yeah, that's where I'm coming down. And I think it's an astute thing to connect with here. What we're
Yeah.
getting at.
No, I think I largely agree. I do think there are cases where things can be too heavy-handed. I do, and on the nose.
Sure,
But I get what you mean.
sure.
I think just in the case of like in conversation with
Yeah.
talking of things like House of Dynamite and where it's like dealing or just things like that seem like they're in our current day or dealing with like we're
If a
getting
movie's like
right.
talking down to you, right, that can be heavy-handed, right? Because the movie doesn't
Yes.
have faith in you to understand what it's getting at.
But in
You know that
something like Don't Look Up, I feel like we deserve to be talked down to. That is what I mean.
maybe,
That's kind of, I guess, where
maybe.
I'm at. I don't know, but yeah.
And maybe that's just like where we're coming down to, where it's kind of like we're saying there's a distinction between you know clarity and forcefulness versus like condescension and you know and disdain for who's viewing this film, right? And that's what I think. I don't think people understand that distinction. Sometimes they mix it up, you know. But
Yeah.
yeah, maybe in 2021 we did deserve that a little bit. Who's to say?
Yeah. Yeah. Cool. Yeah, okay, great. House of Dynamite did not work. No other Catherine Bigelow films, huh? Just Zero Dark 30?
No, I've only seen Zero Dark 30. I saw that on my 20 when I was wrapping up my 2013 list. I didn't like Zero Dark 30, to be clear.
Yeah.
I even when I follow this one podcast called like Past, Present, Future. It's a British podcast. He's like a professor at Cambridge, political science, and he one of the things he had going, and I think he's started back up. He has like a series where he like reviews political films, and even his review, which I thought was interesting, of Zero Dark 30, where he kind of like compares it to like a workplace drama. I thought that was an interesting lens, but it didn't really change my assessment of the film, where I was just like very turned off by like this like bitter, cruel post 9/11 jingoistic film, and I really did not like its treatment of torture and its telling of how we found and killed Osama bin Laden. I just really didn't like that way of doing it. But in many ways, its virtues as a film are kind of like completely opposite of what A House of Dynamite is, right? Because that is a character-driven film. You are following Jessica Chastain
Yes.
throughout.
Yeah.
The movie is essentially her journey as she is consumed by as that person who ran the podcast, his name is David Runciman, would put it like that, by the like workplace ethic of the intelligence world of that time post 9/11, and she becomes this like heartless, driven, determined, have to get my guy at all costs, not going to give up on finding OBL no matter what the people in charge say. And no matter how extreme my methods are, it's worth it. Like, she is consumed by that logic and that workplace culture, and is ultimately rewarded in finding and facilitating the death of Osama bin Laden. So it is a character-driven story. Um, and it has a large cast, so it proves that she can do this. But for whatever reason, it was a different kind of movie, and it's part of the reason why I don't think that a film like this either will be or should be as remembered or as acclaimed as maybe her past ventures.
Yeah, I want to see some of her earlier work. Near Dark has been on the list for a long time. Just things that that are not necessarily political thrillers. All I will say is, like I mentioned before, I Zero Dark 30. I do remember that, and that what you just explained was a big kind of perspective of the film, was that it was like people didn't like the idea of how it depicted, like, its view on torture and things like that. Obviously, that's a big part of that story of like, how the US used torture methods at the time. I just don't remember. I remember thinking it was such a big title, Zero Dark 30, and I watched it, and I just remember not having a very strong reaction to it, not very like remembering too much about it. But yeah, all I know is I just remember The Hurt Locker being such a different type of, like I said, more of a character piece, and working so much better. So I would love to hear, because I know how I know Remington on how he likes to react to movies about our conflicts in Iraq and the Middle East, and so I would love to hear your reaction to something like The Hurt Locker, which I love.
Yeah, I was thinking if this got nominated for anything, I would go and visit some of her films that I haven't seen. And the big one being The Hurt Locker, because The Hurt Locker is one of the few Best Picture winners of the expanded era that I haven't yet seen.
Sure.
It's actually the first winner of the expanded era. And so, about time I went and saw it. Because I believe that's Jeremy Renner pre-MCU, if I recall. I don't think he had been cast yet as Hawkeye when he got attention for that movie.
Fucking Anthony Mackie, too.
Really? Okay.
Yeah, I know, right? Yeah. I think I saw it like when I was already in the MCU, and I was like, oh my God, like, MCU.
Yeah, the MCU was like, it was a thing because, like, obviously it stars with Iron Man, but it was very young. It was very young then, so.
But no, yeah. Anyway, but we got to support our women. Like, I'm here for Catherine Bigelow. I was hoping for it, I'm here. Like, give me Catherine Bigelow. But you know what? I don't know.
Well, we both said we're excited for a Chloe Zhao movie. That's supporting women.
That is. But yeah. Anyway, I think on that note, folks, we can wrap it up. Patreon.com/DanIV, everyone. Remington, buddy, thank you so much for joining. Always love getting to chop it up about the new releases. Was a good one. We'll see. Have to have you on. Maybe I'm kind of cutting this down to maybe a little bit more monthly now, the podcast. So hopefully with award season coming up, we can have you on for another one when a lot of more of the big releases come out, or like Oscars. I'm sure you'll be on for Oscars, so we'll talk about that.
I would love to do an Oscar episode. That would be a lot of fun.
Yeah, of course. And of course, you can check us out, folks. Hear more of Remington on Eyes Wide Watch Club, our monthly movie podcast of other films. Where can the people find you, Remington? Let them know.
I am at Angrier Every Day on Twitter because, aren't we all? And over there, you can see me talk about movies and politics. And I am also at R4 on Letterboxd, where you can see the hundreds of thousands of movies that I sort my way through in a given day, week, or month. It's quite a filthy habit at this point. But yeah, that's where you can find me, you the people.
All right. Well, thank you so much, everyone, for listening. And from New York City, Zoran Mamdani, folks, we're here. All right. Good night, everybody.